The Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce serves the interest of its members through numerous programs, advocates for a free and open market economy in Afghanistan, and endeavors to strengthen U.S.-Afghanistan economic relations. AACC's annual U.S.-Afghanistan Business Matchmaking Conference is the world's leading event for promotion of the private sector, business matchmaking, and investment in Afghanistan. AACC works to ensure that Afghanistan's economy and employment of the Afghan people remains a top priority for the U.S. and Afghan policymakers, and serves as a link between business and government to encourage progressive economic policies that will result in increased business, job creation, and investment between the U.S. and Afghanistan. We believe that peace and stability can only be achieved in Afghanistan through the success and growth of the private sector. It is the goal of AACC to promote the exchange of information and provide resources to its members through investment conferences, seminars, networking events, publications, and other avenues to stimulate U.S.-Afghanistan business and investment. The Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce, facilitating U.S.-Afghan business, investment, and trade ties.
Hello, everyone. So I think the way that we're going to structure this panel is I'll start by making some opening remarks about the American University of Afghanistan, which we sort of see as one of the first barriers to aiding women-owned businesses. And then I'll make introductions of the panel, and we'll get into a moderated discussion. So thank you all so much for coming to this important event held during watershed transition in the U.S.-Afghan partnership. One of the great defining characteristics of the AACC conference is the diversity of its stakeholders, all who play a critical role in forging and advancing the future of this partnership. As Executive Director of Friends of the American University of Afghanistan, which is a 501c3 based here in DC, I've had the privilege of witnessing tremendous progress made by young Afghans. So many of Afghanistan's most pressing issues are generational ones. The country's young people, coupled with an unprecedented level of exposure and greater education, places a burden on its youth to resolve the difficult questions facing the country. And having visited Afghanistan countless times over the past 9 years and speaking to the youth, they not only accept the challenge, but offer insightful and original solutions to address them. AUAF, like every institution of higher learning in the capital city, is a microcosm of Afghanistan. Representation from every province, a 40% and growing female enrollment rate, a diverse age spectrum, and a high population of returnees lends the institution to transform into a harbinger of the bright future of the country. AUAF prioritizes, above all else, an open space for discussion. Discussions which are then institutionalized and developed. Initiatives such as our partnership with Stanford Law School to develop student-led research and textbooks, or our partnership with the University of Chicago or Boston University, are all in place due to student demand to arm them with education and knowledge to transform their country. The students at AUAF are civically engaged, and graduates become key figures in both the public and private sector, constantly growing a network that has stability, partnership, and advancement, which is all central to the university's goals. To that end, we share the same message as the AACC and many of the stakeholders present here today, and we hope AUAF contributes to this shared goal for everyone. Thank you. Come back to this mic. Okay, so we have a great panel today. Lael Mohib, who I'm sure you all know, she's the communications advisor to the Deputy Minister for Policy at the Ministry of Finance. She's focusing on the government's reform agenda. She's previously Chief of Staff at AOAF, which we love. She's also founder and director of a nonprofit that supports and educates special needs orphans in Afghanistan called the Enabled Children's Initiative. So thank you, Lael. We also have Mushkan Wafik El-Kozai. She's the CEO of Impressive Consulting and also a longtime entrepreneur. She started her first business in 2004, and then in 2007, she established the World of Women Business Market, which was the first women's business shopping center in Kabul City. She serves as advisory board member of AACC. She's received a number of awards, so many, but among them, and most recently, she was recognized as the best leader of the National Professional Women's Association of USA. And she also has her master's degree in international business from AUAF. Okay, so although more work needs to be done, I think we can all agree with that, the last decade in Afghanistan has shown significant improvements in service delivery and across every major human development indicator, from improved infrastructure to human resources, from access to basic services to education. One of the most salient developments, often overlooked, is the exponential growth in civil society actors and organizations which have, over the course of the past 5 years, redefined the social contract between the people and the government of Afghanistan. So, Lael, you have the first question. Do you sense a change in tone and in political will among Afghans, particularly young Afghans today? And why is this crucial to the future of the democratic process in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Mr. Lutfi and Jeff, for having me here today. It's an honor to be here and to speak to you. And I'm also honored to share the panel with Mushkan, who comes from a family of extraordinary businesswomen. So it's an honor to be with you on the panel, too, and you as well, Kat. Sure. Let me just get this a bit closer. So in terms of Kat's first question about changes in the government and political will, I will say that I think it's on both sides. You mentioned civil society, but also in the government. As Minister Faruqi said, if there's one theme to this government, it's certainly reforms, I think. And that is really reflected in the number of young, well-educated people in the government, including women. In terms of women's economic empowerment, I think that for the first time, the government and civil society has a collaborative, constructive relationship when it comes to women's economic empowerment, and there's a real dialogue there on what needs to be done on both sides. What are the needs? How can we turn this into policy that we can invest in? And that comes down to political will. And we have a First Lady who is extremely engaged in women's economic empowerment activities, who has an open door policy. She meets with a lot of these business women, and she's been a big facilitator for their efforts. Of course, President Ghani himself is very invested in this issue. And we also have young people throughout the government who are implementing those policies and strategies. We have champions in the government. Just to give a few examples, we have Deputy Minister of Commerce and Industry, Camilla Siddiqui, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Economic Affairs, Adil Araz, Deputy Minister of Finance for Policy, Nahid Sarabi. So not only do we have the high-level political will, but we also have people with know-how and expertise, and a lot of women who are actually implementing, and we're seeing those results.
Thanks, Lael. Mushkan. So as advisory board member of AACC, you occupy a very important space in the public-private sphere. Could you tell us a little bit more about the mission of AACC and what you do and see as a short, medium-term challenges and opportunities?
Thanks so much, Kat, and thanks so much, everyone. It's my honor to be part of this panel. So first of all, I'm going to give some background of AACCI. So AACCI established year 2017, and the purpose of establishing AACCI to improve and increase the women economic growth in Afghanistan. One of our core area of focus, we are looking to increase the engagement of women with public policy in decision-making level. As you know, we believe that women politically and social economic status improve when women become more involved with the government decision-making level. So fortunately, this is a good news that AACCI gain seats at the important and ICE policymaking tables such as Economic Council and Private Sector Executive Committee. One of my good friends always says that when you're running a business, you should be involved with the politics. If you're not involved with the politics, politics will run your business. So beside that, our other area of focus, we are looking to help women-owned businesses to have access with government contracts, access with the capital to growth and startup of their business, access with education and career development, and finally, we're also looking to help women to have access with national international market.
Lael, and I know that you have been involved in this for quite some time.
Yeah.
Continue.
Okay. So. Okay, should I continue? Okay,
yeah.
since women-owned businesses now has their own umbrella organization chambers, their own address, and both national and international organizations are approaching us to connect our women business owners to different opportunities. Since last year, AACCI has attended 33 international and national events, regarding the challenges, of course, because AACCI is one of the membership-based organization, so we want to do more hard work to get the economical sustainability of the organization. So I'm going to share few our 2018 plan. So we are looking to, first of all, marketing and promotion of women-owned businesses through ongoing campaign Buy from Afghan Women-Owned Business, and publishing of 4 booklets of member profile and made by Afghan women mark. Conducting 1 research each quarter to ensure valid information about women-owned businesses, condition in hand for policy advocacy and increase of awareness among policy and program makers. Conducting bazaar rows on regular basis, bi-monthly, and a special occasion, a total of 8 bazaar. Establishing at least 1 permanent exhibition location, which would be rented out to women, and turns so all women from Kabul provinces are benefited. 6 batches of training program with practical activities on marketing, financial management, operation management, and quality management and quality control, and certification will be held. This is targeted toward established businesses for their expansion and standardization. 3 to 4 batches of startup training and mentorship will be held to increase the number of women-owned businesses. Great idea and business plan will have the chance to find investors. 4 zone offices in Mazar Sharif, Herat, Jalalabad, and Kandahar will be launched. 2 to 3 markets in the Middle East, such as Dubai and Bahrain, will be explored. Through conducting exhibition and training programs with emphasis on digital marketing, a number of government contracts will be made by women through AACCI facilitation. A production space as a women industrial mini park will be arranged with the government in Kabul and major provinces. A number of government laws and procedures will be amended. 300 women in Kabul and provinces will be made aware of government law and policies. A number of partnerships with regional and international organizations will be made to bring further business opportunities to women.
Thanks, Mushkan. Layal, can you talk a little bit about the government's strategy for women's economic development?
Sure. And before I do, I just wanted to really commend Mushkan and Manisha and all the women who've started AACCI. I think what's so valuable about it is that they're networked and they're able to really lobby for changes that they all know that they need. And there's examples we can talk about later of how that's materialized. So the government is really focused on women who have been cut out of past aid programs. So that's mainly women in the informal economy who are involved in agriculture and in rural areas. And the government's strategy, it's called the Women's Economic Empowerment Program. It's one of our 10 national priority programs. And as I said, it's focused on that group of people. According to the 2016 Central Statistics Office, we know that of working age women, 29% are economically involved, most of them in the agricultural sector, over 60%, and some in manufacturing, about 24%. So that need has been identified, so the program really focuses on that group. It's a 15-year program. Over the course of that time, the government will invest over $250 million in this area. And it has many components, and it involves multiple ministries coming together to address different areas, including the Ministry of Rural Development, the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock, Ministry of Education, Health. Lots of different actors are involved. So one of the components is increasing the availability and the analysis of gender stats, which the Ministry of Women's Affairs is doing, so that we know what the needs are and we have a baseline to chart progress. Removing legal barriers is also a huge part of this national priority program. And the Ministry of Women's Affairs and the Ministry of Justice put together a committee to review all of the laws and regulations that are already in place and all of those that are backlogged to make sure that they are compliant with the rights afforded to women in the Constitution, but also that they're conducive to the goals of this national priority program for women's economic empowerment. The World Bank did an assessment and said that there were 22 laws that were discriminating against women and blocking them from economic advancement. And those are all under review and at various stages of review. There's also a complaints registration mechanism within the Ministry of Women's Affairs so that people can communicate with the ministry on these issues. I think that to give an example of some of those key laws and regulations that have been put in place, and there's a long list of them. The labor law has been reviewed and has been reworked substantially, the anti-harassment law and regulation. There's been a lot of efforts at the Attorney General's office to make sure that the elimination of violence against women law is actually being implemented. The Civil Service Commission launched a gender integration policy, which all the ministries are responsible for implementing. So across the board, there's a lot of positive changes. One that directly affects women's access to finance is the laws relating to inheritance, but also women's rights to own property. One of the positive changes that was on all new property documents, both the husband and the wife's name must be listed so that she has ownership over that property, which of course would be advantageous to her in getting a loan. And another very important policy that has been implemented is through the National Procurement Authority, which is responsible for overseeing all of the government's procurement. Through the lobbying efforts and collaboration with the AACCI, this came about that women-owned businesses or businesses that employ over 50% women will have a 5% advantage in the procurement process. Another component sorry, Kat, I'm going to go. There's quite a few components to this. Is inclusive access to finance. And overall, there has been a lot of encouragement on the government's part to get the banks to loan more, and particularly for women. And I saw I think one of the greatest challenges would be that women didn't have guarantors for smaller loans or collateral for larger loans. So these issues are being looked at. A key part of the Women's Economic Empowerment Program is to extend and expand informal finance mechanisms that are already working for a lot of the women that are targeted through this program, including village savings groups, cooperatives, and self-help programs. And they're working through the Citizens Charter program, which is the government's largest national development program to reach these women. It comprises, the community development councils in each village are comprised across the country of 48% women, so they do have a high representation. And then some of the more specific programs that are mainly, finance programs that are mainly being implemented through the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock right now are the Financial Graduation for the Ultra Poor program, which exclusively targets women, the Sharia Loan Project, and the Agricultural Loan Project as well. So there are programs going on now. And to date, or a couple months ago, over 70,000 women had been supported in agricultural activities and over 35,000 in the in animal husbandry activities. There's also work to improve access to agricultural inputs, extension services, markets, a lot of collaborative work going on between the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the Ministry of Development, and the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock as well. So there's really a comprehensive look at this. There's also an education and a healthcare aspect to this national priority program, which I know we'll talk about later, so I'll hold off for now.
Excellent. So we've heard that there are about 850 registered women-owned businesses in Afghanistan. Mushkan or Lael, if you want to chime into this as well, what sectors do you think are in the best position to advance sustainable job growth? Mushkan, do you want to start?
Okay, actually, based on my understanding and some data, the three sectors create always very sustainable job in Afghanistan. One is the health sector, the other is the education sector, and the third is the agriculture sector. So normally, Afghan women is more involved with agriculture activities in Afghanistan. So I would say agriculture sector will be the number one sustainable sector to create job for women.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the focus of the Women's Economic Empowerment Program is mainly women working in agriculture. But also, one of the benchmarks of this program is to hire over 32,000 female teachers across the country. So that's another sector, education and healthcare, to hire several thousands of community midwives and train them across the country.
Mushkan, you've been an entrepreneur for such a long time and worked across a number of sectors. Can you tell us about some of the new domestic and international initiatives that have advanced this state of female entrepreneurs in Afghanistan?
Of course. So I would say there is many programs going on in Afghanistan, but of course I would name first the Promote, which has four components, and it's a very large project in Afghanistan. They are training the new leaders for Afghanistan, support women to get sustainable businesses there, and as well they are providing the higher education opportunity for female in Afghanistan. Besides that, I can name another program which is called Peace Through Business. Peace Through Business is one of the programs which started on 2007, and it's going on till now. So one of the good things about this program, one of the best components about the program, they are providing the training, mentorship, and advising sessions for women-owned businesses. And the good things about that, they are supporting their members or their alumni until like it's about 10 years. So all the members getting still their services. So the other good program in Afghanistan, it's a PPP, the private-public partnership program, which is implemented by Afghanistan government, and it's also very supportive program to support the private sector in Afghanistan.
And Lael mentioned this a little bit, but can you speak to the 5% preference change in the national procurement procedure for women business owners? I know Lael mentioned this, but can you talk a little bit about the effect that that has on business owners? I think, Mushkan, can you speak from experience about the 5% preference change?
Of course. So 5% means that government of Afghanistan really committed to award 5% of the project to Afghan women-owned businesses. So, which is a great initiative, and I believe because of corruption and women-owned businesses didn't have any access to high-level people in the government, so that's why they were not able to get any project in the past. But since the government itself is a large buyer, so I think it's a big initiative for Afghan women, and it will really help Afghan women-owned businesses to get more stable, to create more sustainable jobs through getting government contracts.
Lael, you talked a little bit about agriculture and land, and and we've talked about this too. Land is central to economic growth in Afghanistan. The ability for Afghans to have access to land and the legal protections and remedies afforded with this right is vital to economic growth and strengthens the state. According to USIP's Liz Wiley, who published a study on the state of property distribution in Afghanistan in 2013, land is increasingly a source of conflict, accounting for nearly 50% of all personal and communal disputes. As always, women are the first and most vulnerable victims. Lael, can you speak a little bit more about, or maybe shed some light for us on the state of women's access to land and some of the policy developments?
I mentioned that there's this new requirement that property documents have to have both the husband and the wife's name there. But also, I think in general, land grabbing has been a huge issue that's been addressed from day one with this government. I think it's more like 60% of civil disputes have to do with land. So it's a big issue that's being looked at across the board, not just in terms of women's access, even though that was zoomed in on. One thing that has changed is that the Attorney General's office and the reforms there, a lot of those civil disputes on land used to come through the Attorney General's office, and that has now ended because they should be going through the courts. But AACC, the Independent Land Authority, has developed a land bank, and there's just been a lot of work to make sure that the laws are addressing those issues around land grabbing, and of course that women are affected. So those are some of the changes in general.
And Mushkan, with women's entrepreneurship on the rise, can land act as collateral for women who need credit to grow their business?
Yeah, actually, since we know that Afghan women are not independent to get a loan under their father, husband, or brother name land. So yes, of course, if there's a programs that Lael mentioned, and if it's really implemented in Afghanistan, it will be very helpful to women get loan by using their land as a collateral.
I just want to add to that aside from the legal aspects, one of the biggest problems is that women just don't know they have these rights. So there's been a huge national awareness raising campaign happening through the Ministry of Women's Affairs, but also across all of these ministries and justice sector who are implementing reforms on what your rights are. So there's a big disconnect between the legal reform and the law and the actual implementation of it and somebody coming and claiming their right. And there's a lot of work to be done there. But that is also being addressed.
Some of the people in the audience will remember the strong contingency of Afghan women government officials who visited D.C. in February 2018 through Georgetown's Institute for Women, Peace and Security. Leah, what is the status of women in senior government positions in Afghanistan, and what has been their impact so far?
I don't know where to start because first of all, again, I mentioned at the beginning of this talk the political will. I think a lot of credit has to go, number one, to President Ghani and our leadership for giving women the chance, and not just token women, but really qualified people. The fact that there are women is an added bonus, but a lot of the women in these critical positions in the government are highly qualified, and they're doing an excellent job. The president required that each minister hire at least one female deputy minister. So I think we have 11 or more female deputy ministers now, and those are critical technical positions, implementer positions. Our Minister of Mines is a woman. So I think that, and we have several commissioners who are women as well. Two of our top commissioners at the Civil Service Commission are doing wonderful work as well. So I think that, for me, the fact that there are women is very important, but almost secondary to the fact that they're just well-educated, well-qualified people who are hired based on merit and doing an excellent job.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the last question, just bringing up the importance of education. And this question is to both of you. What role does primary and higher education play in creating the new generation of women business leaders?
Okay, I think education is the key of empowering women, of course, because everyone believes that when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. So based on my understanding, once we educate a woman, even it's primary or higher education, so we will give them more confidence, more power to be independent, to be part of decision making at home and the society, and as well in their careers. So and as a leadership role as well. So education is very important for both male and female, but of course because Afghanistan is a very developing country in women, so we only have 10% of educated women in Afghanistan, so we need more efforts. And we need more higher education. We need more education opportunities for women, especially in higher levels.
I'll just add that I mentioned earlier that the Women's Economic Empowerment Program looks at the lifespan of a girl and a woman, and really considers that in terms of her economic empowerment. So there is a goal to get more and keep more adolescent girls in school. So the Civil Service Commission has a goal of hiring 30,000 plus female teachers in every province of Afghanistan, and they have hired over 3,000 right now. There's, as you know, the illiteracy rate of women is still terrible in Afghanistan, and there's a lot of work to be done in that area. The Ministry of Education already has a program, a literacy program for women, and they're expanding that by 160,000 women for now. There will also be more investment in building dormitories for women at universities, so that women feel that they have a safe place to go and study. And I also mentioned the healthcare aspect before, that there's also a lot of, there's a program to hire and train more community midwives. So it is extremely important and integrated into the whole strategy.
Thank you. And I don't know if we're taking some Q&A from the audience.
Thank you. Oh, Doug, how are you? Doug rides his bike in DC traffic, by the way. He's lucky to be alive. Bill Jorn on the AACC board. I want to pick up on the reference to the
You have to speak into the mic,
Okay,
sir.
sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Very good. On the, I guess you'd say the concept of the registry for land, if there one exists or not, is it being digitized, and will there be access to it anywhere, in effect, through apps on mobile devices and so forth? And of course, there'd have to be an awfully lot of surveying done and that kind of thing. But it's that's a question. But it seems to me also that one of the principal ways in which land can be secured for an owner would be through a government-sponsored, validated, et cetera, registry system.
Yes, thank you. So there is a land bank registration database that has been set up, and there's tremendous amount of surveying going on, and there's some hundreds of thousands of acres that have been surveyed so far. I don't know the exact number. And I'm not an expert on this, so I'm sure that there might be somebody here who knows more about it, but I'm happy to connect you with the person in charge of that. So yes, it is totally online. It is totally digitized. I mean, there's a lot of e-governance reforms happening across every ministry. That also helps cut corruption, of course. And actually, the Land Authority has made great progress. It's one of the big success stories. That's all I know. I don't want to speak out of school.
Jack Pagano, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and a broadcaster in Afghanistan. The question goes out to you. Isn't it so much the men we have to educate, not so much the women? Been there since 2007. Women are wonderful. They want to learn. They want to mentor. They want to advise. It's the men. The men are stopping them. How do we educate the men?
Well, yes, I agree with you, but we don't have time to wait for the men, quite honestly. So I think one thing personally that we do not do is give enough credit to our Afghan female advocates. We have some incredibly outspoken, intelligent women Afghan leaders, one who is at this table with me. And I personally have seen them given a real platform and a lot of authority in this government. And they're bringing a lot of changes. Now, I have to give credit to our male colleagues as well, because while there are problems of patriarchy and I would say misogyny, if I may, there are also male champions for women's rights across the country, in homes, in government. And they're also doing tremendous work. I can talk about different civil society actors in rural areas. I'll name a couple. There's a young man in Kandahar named Matia Lawesa who runs an organization called Pen Path, and he's a huge advocate for girls' education. There's others, I know some in Nangarhar who are working for women's rights. A civil society actor there organized an event on Women's Day in Jalalabad where the First Lady spoke last year. So let's give credit to those men too. You won't see them on TV usually, but they're doing very important work. And also, I do have to say that there is a generational change that is very hard to quantify in Afghanistan, and maybe Mujgan can speak to this as well, where we have young people, 75% of the country is under the age of 35, who are very entrepreneurial, who are taking social risks to change things they aren't comfortable with in the country. And they don't get enough of a platform, but they're there and they're doing incredible work, and I'm on their side.
Okay, very interesting question. Actually, I remember in 2009, we have a project, it was about women's rights. So we always train women about their rights. So I always believe that it's not correct. We should not train women regarding their rights. We should train men regarding women's rights. They should understand that how to implement the women's rights in the society. The same answer for education. Of course, We should have more campaigns, more programs for men in Afghanistan because so it's true. Girls and women are very interested to continue their education, but the barriers always men in the country. So if we educate them, if we make them understand the values of education, so if we have some campaigns regarding educate women, and the campaigns should be supported by Afghan males, so I think, of course, it will work. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Suruj from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan. I don't have any questions, but a very quick point. But before that, I wish to thank our distinguished panelists for sharing their insights and perspectives on women's economic empowerment. Specifically on women-owned SMEs, in our view, a very important component is market access. And in this context, helping women with value chains development remains very crucial. And I'm very much pleased to inform that under RECA, Regional Economic Cooperation Conference on Afghanistan, we have already incorporated this very important component into our agenda. And we have already partnered with the AACC to develop some concrete and targeted activities in this context. We have already hosted a special event with the presence of the First Lady back in November last year in Ashgabat. And we have also been able to develop the first policy paper on the RECA on women's entrepreneurship development. So, of course, I'll be more than happy to elaborate more on this aspect tomorrow in our panel on regional cooperation. Thank you.
Maybe I could jump in. Jeff Grieco here from AACC. Maybe one last question, if I could, just to focus a little bit on the access to finance issues. So this morning, Minister Mastur talked about the Financing for Development Summit that was held in New York this past week. There is a big focus within the UN and within the multilateral and bilateral donor community on improving access to finance for women in Afghan business. The bank has several different vehicles that they use for that, but probably not well communicated, I think, to the women that are doing the business in Afghanistan. Do you have recommendations on ways to improve communications to women entrepreneurs in the country? Are we only allowed to do Facebook? Should there be other things that maybe would be effective in communicating how they could access finance for their own businesses or expanding their businesses? Or what is your feeling generally at AWCCI about access to finance as a priority among all the challenges that you have to deal with to help women in business?
Thanks so much. Actually, based on my experience, the best medium channel to reach our women is we should have some programs to TV stations, because television is the only source that most of women are watching. And of course, we should give them more awareness about how to get finance, because for getting finance, it's not only important to have the collateral. You need to have a very sustainable business plan. You need to have a very sustainable business operation documents. So, of course, I would recommend if we should have some campaigns or some sort of roundtable discussions regarding how to access to finance through TV channels, so that will be more useful. Thank you.
All right, great. Lael, anything from like Ministry of Finance perspective on what they're working on in those specific access to finance areas for women entrepreneurs?
I think that what the main focus now is through the Women's Economic Empowerment Program. And as I said before, that's mainly informal finance, working through the Citizens Charter Community Development Councils to, through savings groups and things like that. That's the main focus now.
Okay, so one of the things that we're working on at AACC is the possibility of having a banking mission come from Afghanistan to the United States later this year. And we'd like to include some women bankers and women business on that mission, where the focus of the trip would be to discuss with major American banks who have no corresponding banking relationships yet with Afghan banks, but which Afghan banks have a lot of requests to solve challenges that they're facing that they think would help from having an engagement with the U.S. banking community. We want to help facilitate that if we can. So that might be something we'll come back to both of you and talk about in the future as well. And we really thank you and Kat and everyone for the panel. We're going to take a very short 10-minute break, and we'll come back in here for 3:10 for one of our major keynote addresses. Thank you.